In today's video, we're diving into the addictive, productivity-killing, and yet somehow still rewarding world of clicker games. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to build, modify, and launch a feature-unlocking, revenue-growing clicker game of your very own. Let's get started. Clicker games, or incremental games, are simple yet addictive. They start with basic actions, like clicking to earn a point, but quickly evolve into complex systems where exponential growth drives the experience. We're going to build an app development clicker, where you develop apps, upgrade features, and grow your digital empire. We've built a free template which you can find on FlutterFlow Marketplace. But if you're following along from scratch, here we go. The core gameplay is simple. You click to develop new apps, you earn revenue with each app that you create, and you use your earnings to unlock features that multiply your revenue. We have a revenue per app per second variable, which keeps track of how much we're earning every time the clock ticks over. And we've got a generated apps list with our store of 100 apps ready to go. Now let's look at the data types. Revenue will be a double. Apps will be a list of strings. Features will be its own special data type. Revenue per app per second will be a double, and our generated apps list will be a list of strings. Now let's have a look at that special data type for features. Each feature has a name, a cost, a description, a boolean to show whether it's purchased or not, an image, and a multiplier. Now the multiplier is how much you'll multiply your revenue once you have the feature. So let's set these up inside of FlutterFlow. Now that we've got them all written out in our notebook, it's really easy to come in and just plot them all out. Now here's where we put in our feature data type. Each feature has a name, a cost, which we'll put in as an integer, but it can also be a double, a description, which will be a string, a flag to tell our game if it's been purchased or not, assuming that every feature can only be purchased once, an image, which is an image path, and our multiplier, which will be a double. We'll go back to our app state variables and add in our features, which will be a list of our feature data type. It'll also be persisted, meaning that it'll stay loaded within our game regardless of if we change screens. Revenue per app per second we'll put in as 0.01. Now this will just keep our app ticking over in case we haven't purchased any new features yet. Here's where we build out the core of the gameplay. Under each feature, you want to add in what they look like. So, for example, to set things going, you might want to set up a theming feature, which implements global theming and attracts more users. And it costs nothing, but it does multiply the revenue, so things can get kicked off. Similarly, you might also want to implement improved navigation, again costing nothing, but allows your users to generate more revenue because the multiplier is larger. For this one, we'll give a multiplier of 1.75. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Our next feature, we want it to cost a value, and so we'll set it as a cost of 3. So while it will decrease our revenue by 3, it'll multiply the remaining revenue by 1.8. Okay, so our gameplay kicks off when you develop an app. So we'll add a button to our column called Build App. We'll also give it a leading icon, just so it looks nice in our UI. Now, what happens when we click on the Build App icon? Well, we need to increment our apps by 1. And so how do we do that? Well, we need a loading page that'll get us our initial list of app names that are ready for development. So we'll create a new page here called Loading, And inside of that, we'll add a new component, which will just be a little loading indicator. And I've already got one developed here because they're not going to be able to develop any apps if we don't have any app names generated. So in this component, we've got a progress bar and a timer, and we think it'll roughly take 5 seconds to generate a list of app names, which we'll do via OpenAI. So with our progress bar, we set the progress value to be a code expression, which is our timer value in milliseconds. And we want to return a double. And to keep everything null safe, we write our expression out like this, with 5,000 being our 5 seconds we think it will take to load all our app names. We'll then add that to the center of our column. Now, when our app loads, we need it to load all of those app names into our app states. So we'll make an API call here. Now, you can make an API call direct to OpenAI, but I've chosen to build out my own backend in BuildShip. I'll share the remix link for the BuildShip workflow, so you can duplicate that workflow for yourself. You make an API call to get your names, and you set that up here under a backend call in your action flow editor. But we haven't actually got any idea of how the data is coming back from our API call yet. If we just wanted to add everything and we knew it was going to be a list of names, well, we could just include the standard JSON path, but we don't know that. So FlutterFlow includes this great feature that lets you test out an API call before you have to set everything up. So here under our API call, we'll hit that test button under response and test. So here's the structure that's going to come back from our API call. Now our list of names is nested under a JSON path called response.names. So let's add that, and we'll just call it names and hit save. That means that when our page loads and goes to run our API call and assign our list of names to our app state variable, we already have a predefined path called names, which is a list of names that'll automatically set that value to our app state. Once that's done, we can safely navigate to the home page. Should the API call be unsuccessful, well, we should tell the user via a snack bar that there was an error generating game data. Okay, with that all set up, we can go back to our homepage and set up that develop app button properly. So on tap, we want to add an app to our list of apps. Now, the name of that app comes from the generated apps list. So we want to add to the list the app from the generated apps list that appears first in the list. After we've done that, we want to remove that app name from the generated apps list. So we'll remove from list at index 0, which is the first in a list. To add to the user's engagement, we're going to play a sound to indicate that we've built a new app. I've got a royalty-free sound here, which I'm going to just add in as a network path. Note that I'm not awaiting playback, so it's not going to hold anything up. Next, we're going to build out a component to showcase the features that are available for our users to upgrade their apps with. This is a great opportunity to use the AI component generator within FlutterFlow. We'll just give it a description of what we want the component to look like. So a card showing a feature of an app with an image and feature name at the top, a description below that, and a button with a shopping cart icon and the cost shown within it. Next to that, we'll show a multiplier, and that multiplier will be in front of some text which says revenue per app. Okay, it's done it successfully, so let's give it a look. This doesn't look too bad to me. So we'll insert the component and we'll call it feature. Let's rate it 4. All right. So each feature needs to have a parameter, and that comes from the feature app state variable. So we'll assign it that data type. And now we'll tie all of the elements of that component to parts of that feature data type. So for example, the image will come from the specific features image. The name will come from the feature's name. You'll need to give that a default value. The button, which includes our cost, will need to come from the feature's cost. I'll make that a number format that includes a decimal and looks like currency. Make sure you include a decimal type here. The description will come from the feature's description. Again, you'll need a default variable, and our multiplier from the multiplier. But to get that X at the end of our multiplier, you'll want to use the combine text feature. So copy that multiplier, select combine text, put your multiplier in, and then we can include X at the end of it. We're also going to need to know the features index within our list of features. And the reason for that is because once we click the button, we need to say that that feature has been purchased. And to do that, we need the index of the feature within the features app state variable. And we want to rebuild the containing page whenever that button is clicked. When that button's clicked, we also want to update the revenue per app per second. Now this is a double, and we're going to use this code expression to do that. We want to times the current revenue per app per second, and we want to times that by the multiplier, which comes from our parameter. And we'll write out the expression like this and hit check errors, because with our expressions, FlutterFlow won't let us continue unless we've had a check for errors. Finally, we'll want to deduct the cost of that feature from our revenue. And again, we'll do that using a code expression. So we'll take the cost, which is an integer, and we'll take that from our parameter. And we want to return a double because remember, our revenue is a double. So it's written out as cost, 2 question marks, and 0. Include that in brackets and put dot to double, and that will keep us safe from null errors. Now let's build out the rest of the UI. We'll add a divider, and then we'll use our new Flex widget to showcase our list of features and the apps we've already developed. We can use FlutterFlow's inbuilt responsive variables to define whether our Flex widget should be horizontal or vertical. If it's a small mobile phone, so below our mobile breakpoint, we want it to be vertical. Otherwise, if it's a bigger screen, we do want it to be horizontal. And so we'll set our constants as false for mobile and true for all the other fields. We'll then put 2 columns within our Flex widget. The left will show all our list of features, and the right will show all of the apps we've developed and their names. So at the top of our left-hand column, we'll give it a title of Add New Features, and on the right, we'll give it a heading of Your Apps. Next, over on our left-hand column, we'll add a wrap. A wrap is a multi-child widget, which will allow us to use the generate children from variable feature to add in all of the features that we've already predefined as part of our app state. Then we just give it one child and it will generate all of its children from our features list that we've already set up in our app state variables. Next up, in our Your Apps column, we want to add another wrap. Now, this wrap will house a row containing every one of the apps that we've developed, its name and an image. So we'll add a row, add an image, make it 50 by 50 pixels, and then we'll add some text. We'll use the text style label large, and we'll give our row some spacing between the image and that text. So we'll put in 12. Now again, we can generate children from variable for this wrap. This is our app state variable called apps. Then we can change each app name to reference our list of names. With this particular wrap, we'll set the alignment to center, run alignment to center, cross-axis alignment to center, and our orientation to up, so that our most recently developed app is at the top of our wrap. Now we've got a couple of errors here. Let's have a look at what they are. So this is saying that our features component is missing some component parameters. And so if we come down to our component parameters, we need to our individual features item and the index in the list that it occurs. Now let's build out the rest of the UI. So top of our app, we want to show the total apps developed. So we'll put some text in and add another widget to show the number of apps that we've developed. Put in a divider, and then we want another heading to say how much revenue we've made. Below that, we'll include the revenue, but we'll also include a little icon next to it. So we'll wrap it in a row. We'll give it a little money icon. Center the contents of our row, and we'll base each item by 12 pixels. Add another divider, and then we'll just move all of those widgets to the top of our column. We'll set our number of apps developed to be the number of apps in our app state variable, and we'll set our revenue to equal the revenue app state variable. The final thing is to set everything in motion, and we're going to set what's called a periodic action when our page loads. So we've set this periodic action to occur every 1000 milliseconds, so every second. So every second, it's going to update our revenue by the number of apps times by the amount of revenue per app per second that we've already set up as an app state variable. Periodic actions are really powerful, but because they loop the way they do, you need to use them sparingly. Every time our periodic action runs, we'll have it rebuild the current page. Now, a couple of final UI tweaks. We're going to make sure that our features are only shown if they've not been purchased. So we'll set a conditional visibility that that features item hasn't been purchased. We're also going to set some opacity conditions here. And we're going to use the animated opacity functionality that was recently introduced into FlutterFlow. And what that will do is gradually fade up any features that we now have revenue for. So if we set our opacity as an if then else condition with a value of 1 if we do have enough revenue, and a value of 0.2 if we don't, and then toggle on the animated opacity toggle, give it a value of 1200 as the duration, which is relatively long, but it'll give us a nice fade-in effect. Then under settings, make sure you've set your initial page to our loading page and not to the home page. And also make sure that your revenue has a default value of 0, so you don't run into any null safety errors. Similarly, set up a default variable value for your total apps developed, and we're almost done. You'll need to test this one out via local run or deploy it to the web. But once that's done, you can click to your heart's content. Use this as a skeleton to build your own amazing adventure. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give it a like, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.